You know, people say time heals all wounds. But I've learned, sometimes, time just teaches you who's willing to keep cutting you. My name's Eleanor Hayes, I'm 67 years old, and I've lived in Knoxville, Tennessee my whole life. I was a teacher for over 30 years, a wife to the sweetest man who ever lived, and a proud mother to my daughter, Lydia. She's always been my heart, smart, soft-spoken, the kind of girl who makes you proud to say, "That's my daughter." When she got married to Brent, her college sweetheart, I thought I was gaining a son. Turns out, I was just letting a snake into my garden. The story started small, as most betrayals do. Brent was charming at first. He'd come over for Sunday dinners, help me with groceries, and even called me mom once or twice. But the second he realized Lydia still valued my advice, something in him changed. You could see it in his eyes. That subtle side eye every time she asked what I thought. The smirk when I told a story. The sigh when I mentioned, back in my day. Still, I brushed it off. I told myself, he's just adjusting. He'll come around. But oh, honey, he didn't come around. He went straight for my reputation, and nearly tore my family apart. It began last Thanksgiving. Lydia had invited everyone to her house, her in-laws, her siblings, and me. I'd spent days baking pies, preparing my famous cornbread stuffing, the one recipe my late husband Tom always adored. That morning, Brent was buzzing around the kitchen like a man with something to prove. He'd been trying new recipes from the internet, fancy things, rosemary glazed turkey, cranberry chutney, truffle mashed potatoes. Mom, Lydia said, Brent really wants to impress your side of the family this year. I smiled. Well, I'm just here to help if you need an extra hand. Brent shot me that look, that tight, polite smile that never reached his eyes. Oh, Eleanor, I think we've got it, he said, waving a wooden spoon like he was hosting a cooking show. You've been doing this your way for years. Maybe it's time to try something modern. There it was. The dig. Hidden under a layer of charm. I laughed it off, though my chest tightened a bit. Well, darling, if it's edible, I'll be happy. He chuckled, but I saw it, the little flash of annoyance. Dinner went fine, until dessert. I'd brought my apple pie, the one I'd made every Thanksgiving for 40 years. Lydia had even texted me the night before, saying, "Don't forget your pie, Mom." Brent's family can't wait to try it. After dinner, everyone gathered around the table. Brent poured wine and said, "All right folks, time for dessert, and a bit of fun." He pulled out his phone, grinning. "We're doing a pie taste test. My mom made her pecan pie, and Eleanor brought her, classic apple pie. Let's see who wins." The table laughed. It seemed innocent enough, until he added, "I mean, no offense, Eleanor, but we're not grading on nostalgia." Everyone chuckled awkwardly. Lydia frowned, but Brent kept going. He filmed people tasting both pies, joking about old-school recipes, and Grandma's apple experiment. When it was my turn, I smiled through it. But inside, something cracked. By the end, his mother's pie won. By one vote. Brent raised his glass and said, "Guess the torch officially passes to the next generation." That night, I went home early. My hands trembled as I washed my dish. It wasn't about the pie. It was about respect. The kind that gets chipped away until you barely recognize yourself. 2 days later, I opened Facebook, and there it was. Brent had uploaded a video titled, "Battle of the Pies, Old School vs. New Cool." The thumbnail? A screenshot of me holding my pie with the caption, When your MIL still thinks apples and cinnamon are groundbreaking, face with tears of joy. The video had over 3,000 views. Comments poured in. Poor grandma, she tried. She looks so serious. Lighten up, lady. One even said, looks like she lost the kitchen war years ago. I sat there staring at the screen, my throat tight, my heart pounding. My daughter hadn't even liked the post, but she hadn't taken it down either. And that's when it hit me, I wasn't just the butt of Brent's jokes. He was turning my own family against me. In the weeks that followed, I noticed little changes. Lydia stopped calling as often. My grandkids didn't visit on weekends anymore. And at church, someone even said, Eleanor, I saw that funny video of you online. You're famous now. I smiled weakly and changed the subject. But inside, I burned. I wanted to call Brent. Confront him. Tell him exactly what kind of man he was. But I didn't. I waited. Because, as Tom used to say, a good teacher doesn't raise her voice, she raises her lessons. So, I decided to teach Brent a lesson he'd never forget. Quietly. Patiently. Thoroughly. And it all started when I got an unexpected message, from Brent's coworker, of all people. She said, Hi Mrs. Hayes, I hope you don't mind me reaching out. I thought you should know, Brent's been sharing your videos around the office. He's using them in his social media training class. I froze. Training class? I typed back. Yes, she replied. He's showing how humor can go viral, using your reactions as examples of outdated thinking. He calls it the boomer effect. I stared at my phone, every muscle in my body trembling. That was the moment I knew, this wasn't a misunderstanding. It was a campaign. And if Brent wanted to play with fire, I'd make sure he felt the heat. For 2 nights after that video, I slept with the curtains open, as if the light might somehow wash the embarrassment out of the walls. It didn't. The house kept the memory like a bruise, dull, stubborn, impossible to ignore. Then the message from Brent's coworker arrived, a small ping on my phone at noon, while I was folding laundry. I hadn't expected to hear from strangers about my family, but the woman who wrote was gentle. Her name was Rachel. She said she worked with Brent at a digital marketing firm downtown and that she'd noticed something that made her uncomfortable. She didn't want trouble, she just wanted someone to know. We agreed to meet for coffee. I told Lydia I was going into town to run errands. When I walked into the little cafe, Rachel was already there, eyes anxious, fingers wrapped around a paper cup like it was an anchor. She looked 28, serious in a cardigan that reminded me strangely of the ones I'd worn when I taught. There was a softness to her that made me trust her before we even spoke. Mrs. Hayes, she said, standing up. I'm so sorry to bother you. Her voice barely shook. I saw the video Brent posted. I work with him, and he's shown it around the office. He's using your reactions as examples, like you were a case study. They even laughed about it in a staff meeting. It was more than I'd been told. Why tell me? I asked. Because he's been building a whole campaign, Rachel said, glancing around. He calls it edge content. It's designed to make people laugh at older people, retirees, grandparents, and to get viral shares. He's proud of the engagement. He thinks it's clever. But not everyone at the firm is comfortable. I kept copies of some things. I thought you should see. She slid a small USB drive across the table like a peace offering and opened her laptop. I can't hand this to anyone at work, I'd lose my job. But you deserve to know what he's been doing. Her hands trembled. I felt a strange mix of gratitude and power. A file can be a small thing, a few clicks, a few megabytes, but what Rachel put in front of me felt bigger than both of us. There were screenshots of Brent's private group chat with coworkers where he wrote things like, "Watch how grandma reacts," classic material. Posted at lunch, higher views, and another message where he forwarded a clip and wrote, "Old school recipes are comic gold. Use as hook." There were also recordings of an internal meeting where Brent, a paltry smile in his voice, presented a slide deck titled, "Monetizing Relatability, Boomer Edition." He actually used a screenshot of my pie for a slide called Relatable Relics. Hearing his voice on that recording, calm, smug, made my mouth taste metallic. Why would he do this? I asked, though the answer was there on the screen. Rachel swallowed. Because views equal promotions. He wants to climb. He thinks there's no harm. But there is. This is personal. She tapped another folder. There's more. He's done this before. He has a whole archive of videos and posts mocking different older people, volunteers at community centers, grandmothers at craft fairs. He calls it market research. My stomach turned. It wasn't just a stupid joke, it was pattern and intent. Brent wasn't merely a thoughtless son-in-law who didn't know how to show respect, he was actively weaponizing the dignity of others for his gain. I asked Rachel, carefully, where she'd gotten these files. She looked at me like she'd been rehearsing the story for days. I downloaded them from the company server 2 nights ago. Her voice dropped. I'm probably risking everything. I didn't tell you all this to start trouble. I told you because you deserve to know, and because some of us think what he's doing is wrong. I thought of Lydia, of her quiet ways, the way she'd always defended Brent at the dinner table. Did she know the scope? Had she watched him compile evidence to humiliate me and others? My chest tightened with that terrible, private ache. What else had been curated from our lives and sold to amuse strangers? When I got home, I closed the front door softly behind me and sat at the kitchen table with the USB thumb tucked into my palm like a hot coal. The house felt different, alert. It was one thing to hear gossip and another entirely to hold a recording of someone plotting your humiliation. I called Lydia and told her I'd like to see her. She came over in less than an hour, eyes bright with concern, hair tucked back like always. She hugged me and said, "Mom, are you okay?" I've been worried. I looked at her, my daughter of 40 years, and told her what Rachel had shown me. I expected her to be shocked, to be angry. Instead, Lydia's face tightened in the most painful way, between disbelief and denial. "Eleanor," she said quickly, voice small. "Brent would never, he's just a goof sometimes. You know him. He didn't mean it like that." Her hands fidgeted with the hem of her sweater. "Did you see the deck he presented?" I asked. "Did you hear him call my life a hook?" She looked away. "I saw the video, I saw the post, but Brent didn't tell me he was doing a campaign. He likes attention." She swallowed. "But he loves me. He would never." Love is a funny thing when it rests between two people and you stand on the outside with the truth. Lydia wanted to believe the man she married. I wanted her to. But the files Rachel had given me were solid, they weren't the mutterings of jealous neighbors. They were digital footprints, messages, recordings, a pattern of behavior. I asked Lydia to watch the recordings with me. She hesitated, but then she sat down, arms folded, a small line of fear at her mouth. When Brent's voice came from the laptop, laughing about boomer content and watching people's reactions like it was a show, Lydia's fingers gripped the chair so hard her knuckles turned white. "Oh my God," she whispered. I felt something inside her crack open. I didn't know. Then don't defend him, I said softly. Listen. The videos went on. Brent's smugness, the way he treated people like materials to be minced for entertainment, the way he dismissed any discomfort with a shrug and the words, "It's content." Each clip landed like another small betrayal. Lydia's face flushed with shame and anger and something rawer, the sense that she'd been living in half-truths. We were quiet when it ended. Lydia covered her mouth, then let out a sound like someone finally letting out air after holding too much. "I have to talk to him," she said, voice tight. "I need to know why." But before she could leave, her phone buzzed. She glanced and paled as she read the message. "Brent, hey babe, big meeting at 6, don't worry about the family stuff. I handled the internet thing." Her lips trembled. "He's told people I'm overreacting. He's making it look like I'm dramatic." Lydia looked at me with tears in her eyes. "Mom, he wants to make you the joke even when I'm defending you." That was the final twist in the knife. He'd not only weaponized my image at work, he was gaslighting his wife about it, framing any defense of me as an overreaction. He was cutting both of us down and smiling while he did it. I took a deep breath. I felt no wild, foolish impulse to confront him at that moment, no feverish shouting. Rachel's files had taught me something else. Evidence is stronger than emotion. Tools are better than theatrics. If I wanted to stop him for good, I would need more than righteous fury. I would need strategy, allies, and a plan that took the truth and made it unavoidable. So I started with small things. I printed copies of the recordings and the screenshots, labeled them with dates. I saved them in a folder I could reach for at any time. I emailed one discreet copy to Rachel with a note of thanks and asked her to keep quiet until I decided the next move. Then I did something else I'd never expected to do. I reached out to a woman from the church, Agnes, who ran the community center where Brent sometimes volunteered. Agnes had a soft spot for fairness and a sharp eye for gossip. When Agnes heard what I had, she did not hesitate. "We will not let our elders be made into a circus," she said. "If he's doing this at work, it will come back around. People will see." That night, I sat at my kitchen table with the recordings on my screen and a cup of tea cooling beside me. The house hummed softly, a familiar, indifferent noise. I thought of Tom's voice, "A good teacher raises her lessons." I smiled despite the ache. I had something better than a lecture now. I had proof, and from proof comes power. But a plan needs a pivot, and that pivot was coming. Because Brent was not the only one being careless with people's dignity. He believed the online world rewarded cruelty masked as humor. He hadn't counted on the quiet, patient women in his orbit who would quietly document his misdeeds and then, like winter, let the truth settle where it would. Tomorrow, I decided, would not simply confront him. I would make him answer to more than me. I would make the people who enabled him see what they were allowing. I would show Lydia that standing by her mother was the only brave thing left. The night after discovering everything, I didn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I heard Brent's voice echoing from those recordings, smug, confident, careless. He'd laughed over me, turned my kindness into content, and the worst part was, I'd loved him like family. The next morning, I sat by the window with my coffee growing cold, watching the autumn leaves fall like tired confessions. Knoxville had that strange early October hush, a mix of warmth and decay. And I realized that was what my family felt like too, something beautiful falling apart in slow motion. Lydia came by again around noon. Her face looked drawn, her usual brightness dimmed. She didn't even bother pretending everything was fine. "Mom," she said softly, sitting across from me. "I confronted Brent last night." I looked at her hands, trembling, pale. "And?" He didn't deny it, she whispered. He said it was just a joke that got out of hand. Said you were being dramatic, that you didn't understand social media. Then he said something that I can't even repeat. Say it. Lydia swallowed. He said, if she can't take a joke, maybe she shouldn't have one. For a moment, I forgot to breathe. That was the line, the kind of arrogance that deserved to unravel itself publicly. Lydia's voice cracked. I told him I couldn't live like this. He said I was free to leave, but he'd make sure everyone thought I was the problem. My heart broke for her. My daughter, trapped between loyalty and humiliation. I wanted to protect her, but I also wanted Brent to feel what he'd made us feel, powerless, exposed, small. That night, as I washed the dishes, I caught my reflection in the window. I didn't see a broken woman. I saw a teacher who had spent decades knowing exactly how to turn mistakes into lessons. So I started planning. First, I called Rachel. You said his firm values engagement metrics, right? I asked. Yeah, she said. They track everything, views, comments, shares. Brent's entire promotion depends on his campaign's numbers. Perfect, I said. Then let's give him some numbers he won't forget. I spent the next week crafting a little storm. It started subtly, a few anonymous emails sent to his HR department containing the same, relatable relics, presentation Brent had so proudly shared. Then a few community center friends quietly began posting stories online about how exploitative that kind of humor could be. Nothing direct, just curious public conversations. But I wasn't done. I also reached out to a local reporter I used to teach years ago, Emily Cooper, now an investigative journalist at the Knoxville Ledger. I told her I had something that might interest her, a local firm running an age-based viral campaign exploiting older citizens for clicks. When she heard the recordings, she went silent for a long moment. Then she said, Eleanor, if this is real, it's going to blow up. It's very real, I replied. But I need it to unfold carefully. I want my daughter to be safe. Emily promised to protect our names until the story was verified. She started digging, confirming Brent's connections, his public posts, even his deleted ones, because nothing on the internet truly disappears. Meanwhile, Lydia moved back in with me temporarily. It was painful watching her cry quietly at night, whispering, I thought I knew him. But it also strengthened her. I saw a new fire behind her sadness. She wasn't just hurt anymore, she was angry. One evening, she came into the kitchen holding her phone. Mom, she said, I found something. She showed me a private Reddit thread where Brent had been bragging anonymously about his viral success. He'd written, people eat it up. They think it's satire. They don't even realize these old folks are real. That was the final straw. Then he'll see what reality feels like, I said quietly. The next day, I gathered every piece of evidence, every screenshot, every clip, every recording, and stored it all neatly on a drive labeled lesson plan. There was a grim satisfaction in that name. Brent had treated me like a prop in his online classroom of cruelty. Now, I would be the teacher again. Lydia watched me and said softly, what are you going to do? Something I should have done a long time ago, I said. I'm going to remind him that respect isn't optional. It's earned. I called Emily and gave her the green light. She told me the story was ready to publish within the week. The firm's PR department had already refused to comment, which, as any reporter knows, usually means the story's true. As the days passed, I could feel the air in the house changing. The silence wasn't heavy anymore. It was charged, like the moment before a thunderstorm. I'd always taught my students that truth moves quietly until it doesn't, until it strikes. And when it strikes, everyone hears it. The night before the story went live, Lydia and I sat together watching the sunset. She said, do you think he'll ever understand what he did? I took her hand. He'll understand, I said. Because the whole world's about to show him. The morning it all began, Knoxville felt too quiet. The air was still, heavy with that strange calm before something breaks. I woke up early, brewed my coffee, and opened my laptop. At exactly 7:01 a.m., the Knoxville Ledger published the headline. Local marketing firm accused of exploiting senior citizens for viral content. Below it, Brent's photo, mid-laugh, taken straight from his company's own website. My hands shook as I scrolled. Emily's story was fair, detailed, relentless. She'd confirmed every file, every message, every recording. The article quoted anonymous sources, including Rachel, describing how Brent had encouraged staff to use older people's reactions for engagement. It listed screenshots, his own quotes, and a transcript from that smug presentation he'd titled, Monetizing Relatability, Boomer Edition. And then came the real shocker. Brent's own company issued a statement saying he'd been suspended pending investigation. Lydia's phone didn't stop buzzing. Messages from Brent flooded her inbox, first defensive, then desperate. Lydia, they twisted my words. You need to tell them it wasn't me. This is your mom, isn't it? I know it's her. She didn't answer. She just looked at me, pale and shaken. Mom, he knows. I don't care, I said quietly. He started this in public. He can live with it in public, but the story didn't end there, not even close. That night, as we sat by the fire, my phone buzzed again. It was Rachel. Mrs. Hayes, she said, you need to see this. She sent me a link. Brent had gone live on Instagram. He looked disheveled, panicked, sitting in his car. People are lying about me, he said, voice cracking. I never meant to hurt anyone. This whole thing's blown out of proportion. I'm being attacked by someone in my family, someone who doesn't understand how the internet works. And then, he slipped. He laughed nervously and said, it's just like that old woman I filmed, my wife's mom, she overreacted too. The live chat went wild. People clipped it instantly. The comments flooded in, he admitted it. He really did mock his MIL. This guy just buried himself. By morning, it was everywhere. The company officially terminated him, and Emily's article got an update. Brent Hayes confirms involvement in viral mockery campaign during live stream. Lydia didn't celebrate. She just sat on the couch, staring at her phone, whispering, it's really over. But there was one last thing I had to do. Revenge wasn't complete until the lesson was sealed. The next weekend, our community center hosted a small gathering for local seniors, tea, pie, quiet music. I brought my famous apple pie, the same one Brent had turned into a joke. When the guests arrived, Emily showed up with her camera crew. She wanted to film a short follow-up, not about Brent, but about resilience. She asked if I'd like to say a few words. I hesitated, then stepped up to the microphone. Sometimes, I said, my voice calm but firm, the people we love forget that kindness isn't weakness. They confuse laughter with cruelty. But when the truth finally shows its face, it always finds its audience. There was soft applause. A few tears. And then I smiled, not out of victory, but relief. After the event, Lydia hugged me, her voice trembling. Mom, I don't know how you did it without screaming. I looked at her and said, because the best revenge isn't anger, sweetheart. It's dignity. She nodded, eyes wet. I'm sorry for all the times I didn't see it sooner. I squeezed her hand. You see it now. That's enough. A few weeks later, word spread that Brent had left Knoxville. His LinkedIn disappeared. His social accounts went private. Someone said he was working remote for a small firm in another state. But it didn't matter. His name was a warning now. A quiet story passed between co-workers about the man who mocked kindness and lost everything. And me? I started teaching again, part-time at the community center. My first class? Digital literacy for seniors. I told them, we may be older, but don't let anyone tell you we're outdated. We built the world these people are trying to monetize. The room laughed softly. Not mockery, just warmth. The kind of laughter that heals instead of hurts. As the class ended, I stood by the window, sunlight on my hands, and thought, maybe justice doesn't need fireworks. Sometimes it just needs patience, proof, and a steady hand. And as for Brent? Well, he learned what happens when you underestimate the quiet ones. Because we may be silent for a while, but we never forget. 3 months after everything unraveled, winter settled over Knoxville like a soft confession. The trees were bare, the streets quieter, and for the first time in years, so was my heart. The storm had passed. Lydia was living with me full-time now. She'd filed for separation, and though the process was messy, she was calmer than I'd ever seen her. Every morning, she joined me on the porch with coffee in hand, her laughter returning one small ripple at a time. One morning she said, "You know, Mom, I thought revenge would feel meaner. But this feels like breathing again." I smiled. "That's because what we did wasn't revenge, honey. It was truth." Brent's name had faded from the news cycle by then. The internet had moved on to fresher scandals. But for us, the echo of what happened remained, not as pain, but as memory. The kind that reminds you who you are. One afternoon, I went to the mailbox and found an envelope with no return address. Inside was a handwritten note. "Mrs. Hayes. I lost my job, and I've had a lot of time to think. You were right. What I did wasn't funny, it was cruel. I don't expect forgiveness, but I wanted you to know I see it now. I'm sorry. Brent." I read it twice, then folded it neatly and placed it in the drawer with my recipes. Not out of sentiment, but because sometimes even bad chapters deserve to stay in the book. That night, I lit a candle and sat at my old desk, writing lesson plans for the next week's class. The topic was Truth in the Digital Age. I wrote on the board in big letters. Dignity never expires. When the seniors came in the next morning, I shared my story, not the names, not the scandal, just the heart of it. I told them how easily kindness can be turned into content, and how important it is to own your story before someone else tries to. One of the women, Marjorie, raised her hand and said, "But what do you do when someone wrongs you, Mrs. Hayes? When they really humiliate you?" I smiled. "You outlive it," I said. "You make the truth louder than their lies. You don't fight fire with fire. You use sunlight." The class was quiet for a moment, then they clapped softly, not because of the story, but because they'd all lived versions of it. Betrayal isn't new. It just wears new clothes. That evening, Lydia came home with something behind her back. "Close your eyes," she said. When I opened them, I saw a small, framed picture of us from years ago, me, Tom, and Lydia at a 4th of July picnic. She'd written at the bottom in marker, "For all the times you stayed strong when no one noticed." I felt tears sting my eyes. "You didn't have to." "I did," she said, smiling through her own tears. "You taught me that silence can be powerful, but love should be louder." We hung the picture in the hallway, right where the light from the window hit it each morning. Every time I walked past it, I thought of how quickly things can break, and how beautifully they can mend when you stop waiting for apologies and start choosing peace. In the end, Brent's downfall wasn't the real story. The real story was that Lydia found her voice again, and I found my peace. And maybe, somewhere out there, Brent found his conscience. So if you're listening to this and someone's made you feel small, don't rush to destroy them. Just live in truth long enough for the lie to collapse under its own weight. Because it always does. You just have to outlast the noise. And when the quiet comes, it feels a lot like freedom. What would you do if someone mocked you publicly like that? Would you expose them, forgive them, or both? Let me know in the comments. Red heart like if this story touched you, subscribe for more true-to-life tales, and remember, revenge fades, but dignity lasts forever.